you need to understand your values in order to use money to live the life you want to live. And a lot of people haven't done this. So if you have not thought through how you want to live your life, how money can help you with that, what will inevitably happen is somebody else will make that decision for you.
Hello, friends. This is Tyler Gardner welcoming you to another episode of your Money Guide on the Side, where it is my job to simplify what seems complex, add nuance to what seems simple, and learn from and alongside some of the brightest minds in money, finance, and investing. So let's get started and get you one step closer to where you need to be. Today's guest is Hanna Horvath, a certified financial planner who helps people understand why they make the money decisions they make. I was first drawn to Hanna because she clearly has the expertise, she's a CFP, but she also left traditional financial planning because she didn't think money or personal finance was as simple as telling someone they had a 94% chance of being fine in retirement. After years of watching smart people struggle with simple financial advice, she developed a 3 forces framework, revealing how internal psychology, social comparison, and exploitative systems shape every dollar you spend. Through her newsletter, Your Brain on Money, Hanna teaches readers that their money problems aren't personal failures, but predictable responses to forces most people never even see. So she combines financial expertise with behavioral psychology to create strategies that actually work with your brain, not against it. In this episode, we'll address why enough may not be as easy to define as we think, why making our lives easier and easier through money may actually be contributing to a new sense of isolation, and we'll even get into a practical step-by-step system to figure out what the next phase of your money playbook actually should look like. This is a conversation about the forces operating beneath the surface and how to start making decisions that actually align with the life you want to build. I am thrilled to offer you this in-depth and nuanced conversation about money and psychology with Hanna Horvath. Your story is very similar, I believe, to mine. Let's start with just you left traditional finance. That already drew me to want to talk to you. I'm like, all right, another one joins the light side. And you left traditional finance planning to focus, I believe, more heavily on the psychology of money and helping people think through that side of money. What were you seeing in that world, the traditional world, that made you realize something kind of fundamental was missing?
Yeah. So I would say the first thing is I felt like just in my career, I was just regurgitating the same like 10 talking points over and over and over again. I would say the vast majority of people I talk to feel like they're struggling with their money and feel like they're bad with money. And we have access to more information than ever before. So information is not the issue. The traditional finance industry is really like the information industry. They're hyper focused on like what facts to tell somebody. And I was like, okay, so people have access to all this information and they're still struggling. So clearly this is not an issue with information. And that's when I really started to kind of think about, well, so much of our decision making is driven by our emotions and ideas, and it's behavioral. The traditional financial industry really puts an emphasis on the fact that money is this like objective, rational, it's math, right? Humans are rational actors when really it could not be further from the truth. Like we're so emotional, money is wrapped up in our sense of self. And so that really got me kind of starting to walk away from like the whole traditional side of things and more into why are we making the financial decisions that we make? And I believed kind of the thesis behind that was like, once we understand that why, we can then actually change our relationship with money and actually make better money decisions.
And did you find that you weren't allowed to do that? Or was somebody telling you you can't have these types of conversations? And I guess like the word that I'm really clinging to that you just used, which I love, is regurgitate. You know, were you kind of told to deliver a certain script throughout your time and avoid kind of some of the sideline areas that might have helped people even more?
I don't know if it was like allowed or not allowed, but I will say there's like a very heavy emphasis on like, this is the playbook. And again, it's almost treating the client or the person you're writing an article for as numbers, right? Or like as like a robot where it's like, They're going to come in, they're going to give you the inputs, you give them the outputs, they walk away, everything's amazing. And again, it just kept coming back to like, I'm telling people the correct advice, sound advice. They're nodding their head. I would say most people are quite smart. I mean, especially somebody that's coming to a financial planner, they know these basic facts. So they're nodding, they understand. And then 3 months later, it's like, okay, what's happening? They're still struggling. They're still in these like, whatever those kind of bad habits are that are getting them into the situation they are in the first place. And so that's when I'm like, okay, it's like you can lead a horse to water, right? That's where I got into like, okay, we need to actually like sit down and understand all these other factors that are influencing your money decisions. The traditional financial industry, it's like, okay, well, we're not therapists. We don't need to talk about your relationships. We don't need to talk about your early childhood memories. But I would argue you do, because like I said before, your money is so wrapped up in your sense of self. And so if you don't understand your values or what you want money to do for you, it's going to be really hard to kind of change your money habits. The word I like to use is like prescriptive. I feel like traditional financial advice is very prescriptive and is not very focused on these behavioral factors that, surround our money decisions.
Why do you think that is? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot too much because I'll just be transparent. I have no idea. But why do you think it is that it's kind of avoided going into more of these gray areas and just tried to kind of give here's the prescription, take 2 Tylenol, call me in the morning, we're good?
Yeah. If I just speculate, I would say it's just easier to do that because when you get into the behavioral side, you quickly see everyone is on their own personal journey. Everyone has their own upbringing, their own life experiences, and all of those things come together to form how they think about money and then therefore how they think about the world. And getting into that and unpacking that is a pretty in-depth endeavor. And it's very personalized. And so it's hard to create like a script to follow if you're like doing this hyper personalization for every single person. And so I think that's probably why a lot of traditional financial advice, because like the famous answer I always give is like, it depends, right? It's hard when I'm giving someone advice, someone that focused on the behavioral side. Someone comes to me and they say like, oh, how much do I need to save for retirement? Well, it depends. I don't know you. I don't know kind of what your values and what you care about in terms of money is. And so I think that's probably why a lot of the traditional advisors or like, journalists and stuff, they focus on these kind of things to follow because it's a lot easier for them to kind of focus on that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up this idea that one of the probably quintessential questions that anybody coming to you or any financial advisor asks is, do I have enough for retirement, right? Like, is there enough for me to do whatever it is I am envisioning doing? Can you talk to me a little bit about your own relationship with this idea of enough, and how has your definition of it changed throughout your life?
Yeah, definitely. So this is like one of the bigger questions I think a lot of people have with their money. And I think there is a tendency with money to focus on that number, right? And I very much prescribe to that. I'm very type A. The way I grew up was very hyper focused on those like very quantifiable benchmarks. And that's how I define success for myself. So when I graduated college and I was trying to understand, am I doing things right? Am I doing life right? Am I successful? Like, how am I defining success? I felt, and I think it's very easy for other people to feel this way, to anchor yourself to a number. And, for a lot of people, that's money, whether that be how much money you're making, your net worth. And so I think for me, I was very, very much anchored, throughout the first kind of 8 years of my career of like building up my net worth. So I was kind of, amassing. And I did get to the point where it's like, okay, if I just reach this number, I'm not going to feel anxious anymore. Because at the same time, I'm very type A, but I'm also very anxious. And so that would manifest in money with these very like compulsive habits of like, I would be checking my bank account 6 or 7 times a day, which like newsflash for everybody, it doesn't change that much or it should not be changing that much throughout the day. And so I got to the point where I'm like, okay, if I reach this net worth, I'm going to feel less anxious. I'm going to feel like I have enough and like, all this stuff. And I'd reach this number and then it's like, okay, now what? I think for me, then I started to realize like, okay, clearly it's not really about the number, right? It's about my internal relationship to the number itself. And so then it was kind of in that journey with myself of starting to get into that behavioral side of money and understanding like, well, the idea of enough is not really a number. It's more a state of being. And then that's how you get into this idea of money as a tool to help you live the life you want. And so you have to first decide what type of life you want to live. And then you can kind of back into the financial situation you need to have to get there. And so that led me to think about like, well, what do I actually value? What do I actually want to do with my money? And, that helped me define what enough was for me. To the second part of your question, at the beginning of my early mid 20s, I was like saving all this money and I was like, oh, I'm saving all this money to buy a house. And that was like very something that I was like focused on. And a lot of it was because I thought that's what you do. And just for everybody here, I live in New York City, which one, unbelievably expensive, especially the housing market. But two, it's a renter's market. A lot of people don't buy. And so kind of over the course of, my 20s, I started to think, well, what do I actually value? Do I value stability? Is a home part of kind of what I envision my life to be? And I realized no. And I realized that actually a lot of that idea of wanting to buy a house was kind of conditioning and telling me that that's something I needed to do. And so that's why I think it's so important to kind of think through what you actually care about. Like a great example is I value flexibility and I very much value, community and adventure. Like I love to travel. So for me, the way I align my money is often based around kind of those things. So once you kind of start to unpack that, one, it's easy to get to that number of like what is enough. And two, it's easy to like say yes to the things that are actually going to bring you happiness and say no to the things that are not going to make you actually that happy.
This episode is brought to you by Anthropic. I want to tell you about something I use every single hour I'm awake. Claude by Anthropic. Claude is the AI for minds that don't stop at good enough. It's the collaborator that actually understands your entire workflow and thinks with you. Whether you're debugging code at midnight or strategizing your next business move, Claude extends your thinking to tackle the problems that matter. Here's what this looks like for me. While writing my book for Norton, I had a world-class editor. What I didn't have was the ability to bug her at midnight when I was deep in the writing cave questioning every life decision that led me to voluntarily write about Roth conversions for fun. Enter Claude. Questions like how many other personal finance writers have written about this type of content in the past 5 years? And is this sentence funny or do I just think it's funny because it's 1 a.m.? Claude helped with all of it. But here's the one that actually made my jaw drop. I'm currently using Claude Max, and I fed it some of my book content, told it what I wanted to cover across 9 webinar sessions, then uploaded my brand palette and a headshot, and 30 minutes later I had 9 complete 25-page slide decks, personally branded, entirely cohesive, ready to present. What would have taken at least a week of inefficient back and forth and a heck of a lot of money with a designer was done before my coffee got cold. I've been on Claude Max for about a month now, and it's not just good, it's better than anything else I've ever tried, especially for long-form content where you need context, nuance, and an AI that won't hallucinate some statistic that makes you look like a complete ding-dong on the internet. So, if you're a creator, writer, or just someone ready to tackle bigger problems, get started with Claude today at claude.ai/Tyler. That's claude.ai/Tyler, and check out Claude Pro, which includes access to all of the features mentioned in today's episode. That's claude.ai/Tyler. This episode is brought to you by Bilt. You've heard me talk about Bilt as the loyalty program that lets you earn points on rent wherever you live, and they just leveled up even more. As of 2026, homeowners can also earn up to 1.25x points on their mortgage payments. This is thanks to Bilt's 3 new credit cards, the Palladium card, Obsidian card, and Blue card. All 3 turn your housing payments, rent, or mortgage into flexible rewards. So you can choose the card that fits your lifestyle without missing out on points and exclusive benefits. Bilt points can be redeemed at top airlines and hotels, Amazon.com purchases, future rent payments, and more. Bilt points have also been ranked by top publications as the industry's most valuable point currency. Your housing payment is already your biggest expense. Make it your most rewarding. Find the card that fits your lifestyle and apply today at joinbilt.com/Tyler. That's joinbilt.com/Tyler. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Terms and limitations apply. Subject to approval and eligibility, Bilt cards are issued by Column NA, member FDIC, pursuant to license from MasterCard International Incorporated. Were there any moments that led you to this thinking? Because it sounds like, as I'm listening to this, you have figured out the good life and you figured out something that other people, including many retirees I know, are still struggling with. Were there moments that impacted you in a way of, okay, that idea of the house, that idea of enough, that's not for me, and let me all of a sudden change the direction? Were there people in your life, or were there books or writers in your life who kind of nudged you to start thinking about it differently?
So I would say it started off with the moment where I was like thinking about buying a house. I was going to these open houses and I was like, oh, this is like a big financial commitment. And also talking to my friends at the time who had bought houses. And it was kind of like, oh, it actually seems like they're not having a good time for the most part. I mean, I think a lot of people enjoyed a lot of aspects of buying homes. And I definitely don't want to dissuade someone from buying a home if that is what they want to do. But it made me realize where I was like, oh, this thing that we're like told that we need to do might not actually make sense for everybody. And the second thing is, just talking to people about their careers and how they've built wealth. Obviously, we can talk about the psychology of money. That was a huge book for me about introduce me to this world. But a lot of the books I was reading about was very much like, because at this point I was in my mid 20s. So it was a lot of like quarter life crisis books. And it was very much about how should a person be? How does someone define success? And that made me really think about, oh, a lot of it is just very internal. And so I think for me, like in that mid 20s point is like getting crystal clear about like what I actually want to get out of life and what is actually important to me. And I think you can apply that same logic to entering retirement or another period of your life like that.
And I want to build off of what you said about seeing your friends go through this. So you talked a little bit about how kind of by seeing your friends buy the house and potentially not be as happy as the world claims they're supposed to be. You've said before that most of us are spending money to attempt to live someone else's life. And I wrote that down immediately when I heard you say that because I love the line. But could you elaborate a little bit about kind of what you mean by that? Like, especially in our 20s or 30s, when we're just figuring out what do I do with disposable income? How do the lives of others influence what we're doing there?
Yeah, definitely. So, human beings are social creatures. We want to fit in. And a huge part of the way that we try to fit in is benchmark ourselves to other people. We're constantly kind of looking around our friends, our community to, gauge if we are in the in group or not. And again, a lot of that comes back to these like quantifiable metrics. It's a lot easier to say, like, okay, do I have the same amount of money as my friends versus am I the same level of a good friend or a good
Hmm.
daughter
Yeah.
than my friends? So again, it's like we cling to a lot of these very overt or visible status symbols to feel like we're fitting in or not. And so, again, going back to you need to understand your values in order to use money to live the life you want to live. And a lot of people haven't done this. So, if you have not thought through how you want to live your life, how money can help you with that, what will inevitably happen is somebody else will make that decision for you. And it could be the people around you. If you're kind of like, okay, I have this money, I don't really know what to do with it, and all your friends are buying houses, might think to yourself, oh, okay, maybe I should buy a house. Other people are buying a house. Or maybe it's like social media. I mean, on a much smaller scale, I see this all the time. People are like, okay, I don't really know what I want to do with my money. Well, okay, here's like a Instagram ad for this thing that is going to change my life. I talk a lot about this in my newsletter about how so much of marketing is just aspirational. They're trying to sell you a life and they want you to be in this place of lack. And so if you don't understand what you want your money to do for you, you often will be in this place of lack because you won't understand how money can help you bring true contentedness to your life. And so it's a lot easier for you to be marketed to. So that's what tends to happen is like, if you don't have this like internal understanding, all these external forces can kind of come in and push you in one direction or another.
Can you go a little bit further, unpack that a little bit more, this idea of lack? Because I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I see it daily, and I've felt it throughout my life when marketers are spending billions of dollars a year to create lack. But tell me more specifically what that looks like in practice. If I go throughout my day today, where am I seeing myself lacking?
I think for, a lot of people, again, I would say like contentedness in your life is this gap between your expectations and how you're actually living your life. And so I think for a lot of people, they have not set those expectations, or maybe they just don't understand what is actually going to bring me true happiness in my life when it comes to our money. You can go through your budget and like look at what you're spending on. And if you even thought through what is actually bringing you joy, which what isn't, you're not going to be able to kind of configure your money that way. So what tends to happen is we tend to feel the sense of like, I feel like I'm missing something. I don't know what it is. Also, this feeds into this like loneliness epidemic, which I think a lot of people are feeling right now. And so that position to be in is like great business. You're a great consumer for these companies because when you feel like something is missing, it's very easy for companies to say, well, if you just use this one product, you're going to be that person. Even the role or the career of an influencer is that. It's like building this aspirational lifestyle to then sell you products so you can also have this aspirational lifestyle that they have. And the reason why it's so successful, I mean, it's like a multi billion dollar industry, is because so many of us are in this place of not feeling content and not knowing why we don't feel content. And so then that's why it's so easy for us to be kind of influenced again by these external forces.
So is the answer, I mean, because I struggle with this every single day, and I see what you're saying every day. And I know we all share this, right? There's a certain amount of disposable income that we all have, and everyone's competing for our attention, and there are forces acting upon us. And as you kind of pitch it, kind of manipulating us. But what's the answer here? What's the solution to living in this world that is trying desperately to make me feel like I am missing some of the foundational or fundamental components of living a good life?
Yeah.
How do I do it then, other than going out and buying some amazing men's facial products and being all happy around the holidays? Like, what are the answers here?
Exactly. Yeah, you have to know what you care about. And this is actually kind of going to the earlier part of our conversation where I think the traditional financial industry really gets this piece wrong, where when you're focused on using your money to build happiness or contentedness, there's this focus on like essential and non-essential. So it's like you should be only spending money on these essential things. And if it's not essential, you shouldn't be spending money on it, or you should be like cutting back as much as possible. And I like hate this idea because, the example I always give is I almost every day go to a coffee shop down the street. It's like a ridiculously overpriced latte. I mean, coffee prices right
By
now.
the way, I love where you're going with this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm spending like
I hope you spend $100 a day on this coffee.
I'm spending like $7 on this coffee every day. And like any financial expert, if you went to them, they're like, oh, that's not essential. Cut that out. Cut that out. However, I know a lot of the regulars. I know the people that work there. I'll go there. I'll drink my coffee. I'll talk to people. It's an anchoring location for me in the community. And it brings me unbelievable joy and contentedness. It's a really big part of my day. And like I said before, I'm someone that really values community. So it's very important for me to have this. And so again, to me, that is essential. But that couple $100s that I'm spending a month on this overpriced coffee, that is giving multitudes of returns beyond that price. And so once you start to think in terms of that, of like, what is actually bringing me, joy, then you're able to say, okay, I need to keep this thing, but this is other thing that is not actually bringing me a ton of joy that I can cut out.
This episode is brought to you by Gelt. Here's a question I bet you've never asked yourself. What's the difference between a tax preparer and a tax strategist? A tax preparer shows up once a year, collects your documents, fills out forms, and tells you what you owe. That's it. Transaction complete. A tax strategist, they're calling you in October saying, hey, you're about to cross into a higher tax bracket. Let's talk about accelerating some expenses. They're texting you in December. Don't take that distribution yet. Let's run the numbers first. If you're a small business owner or a high earner, that distinction is worth tens of thousands of dollars a year. Gelt isn't your dad's CPA firm. They're proactive. They reach out throughout the year with actual strategy, not just compliance. Should you buy that equipment before year end? Should you pay yourself a bonus or leave it in the business? What's your estimated payment schedule look like to avoid penalties? And here's what surprised me. Their platform doesn't feel like tax software from 1997. It's actually organized, intuitive, and built for people who run businesses, not accountants who love pivot tables. So if you've been avoiding finding a real tax partner because you assume it's expensive or complicated, stop. Gelt can save you money and simplify your life. And they'll give you a free consultation to see if it's the right fit for you. Head to joingelt.com/Tyler. That's joingelt.com/Tyler. And one of the things I've also heard you reflect on is this idea that as we come into more and more money, one of the things we try to do is make our life as easy as possible. Is this a good thing? And again, I ask very selfishly here because as I get money, I'm like, ooh, I do want to make my life easier. Is it a good thing that we want to take away walking down to the local shop and just having someone come to my door? And I'm thinking mainly of, this hyper extreme COVID style where, there were wonderful articles written and disturbing articles written about how the ultra wealthy we're almost going back into, and the analogy was the mother's womb, and that it was this ultra protected space where they didn't have to deal with anything outside, and food came to their house and workout people came to their house and everything was delivered to them. So is that a good thing? And I'm not trying to bias this. I'm genuinely curious about this. Is this good to make it that easy?
This is such an interesting topic and it's so nuanced, but I will say so. Time is our most finite resource. I definitely would argue the power of if you have the means, maybe you do want to save the time. Like, for example, I really hate doing laundry. I'm doing, wash and fold down the street. So for me, that is like giving me returns, that money that I'm spending, because I'm avoiding doing something I really, really don't want to do. As I've written about a lot, we're in this culture of hyper convenience. Like it has never been easier to purchase something, offload something onto somebody else. And I would argue that not only does that make it easier to spend money, which is not always a good thing, but it also can create the sense of like isolationism, which I think is that a good thing to not be exposed to the world in a meaningful way? A big theme I find myself keep coming back to, especially this year, is the sense of like community and how not having community is actually very expensive. And when you're not interacting with people that are not like you or just other people in your community, you lose something there. There is something lost there. And I think it's important to think about beyond just like the straightforward monetary, like, okay, I'm saving this much money or this much time to do XYZ. What else is lost? And something that I advocate for, and I will say I do live in a city that's a little bit more walkable than a lot of other places in America, but what happens if we bring friction back into the buying process or just making things a little bit more inconvenient for yourself to build that community or to interact with other people? And the question I keep asking is like, should this be that convenient? And I think there is definitely a line to walk there.
Yeah, you're kind of getting to this idea of, okay, so let's say we have a lot of money and we're able to buy back our time. And now I'll kind of throw this back on you. What do I do with that time? So let's say, that some of our listeners are inundated daily with all of these, and I'll throw myself under the bus and everybody who claims that they're a financial influencer in one way or another. When someone says the old cliche, time is the most finite resource and it's more valuable than money, I always pause there because I almost feel like there's something missing with the conversation when we just leave it at that time in and of itself is valuable. If we're not going to take that next step and offer, well, what am I doing to fill that time? Because I could sit here in my house for 12 hours in a day and not be beholden to a boss or a W-2. I don't know if that instantaneously makes that time incredibly valuable or wonderful because I feel isolated in the woods of Vermont. And again, I'm a hermit, so I'm fine with that. But can you reflect a little bit on what time means to you as you get older and as you understand money and spaces and third spaces, especially more?
Yes, I completely agree with this point because, again, we're in this culture, mass convenience, and also like mass productivity of like this feeling like you always need to be doing something, especially something that's like connected to monetization or money.
So well said.
And so I think that raises such a good point where it's like, yeah, okay, fine. I'm taking my clothes down the street to do wash and fold, but what am I doing with that saved time? Am I sitting on my couch scrolling on my phone? I would argue like that's not a good use of time. In fact, I probably should be doing laundry in that scenario. And so something that I'm really focused on in my personal life is, can I do something without thinking about labor or just doing something for the sake of doing it? Like a great example is like I'm a terrible artist, but I draw. I doodle all the time. There's no end goal. And again, I'm type A, so like usually if I start doing something,
Oh, wow. Good for you. I'm impressed.
I'm like if I start like trying to learn something, I'm like how do I become pro in 3 months?
Yeah.
And so like I'm like how do I just do something for the sake of doing it? And I think it's really important if it's possible to be out in the world and come in contact with more people because I think it makes you more empathetic. I think it makes you more understanding of other people and also the world. And so I think, again, you raised just such a good point where it's are you paying for convenience because you just want to kind of isolate yourself, or are you paying for it in order to make room for something better or greater? Building community is not always exciting or fun. And it can be, you're interacting with people you might not know. It can be awkward. And it's like this relentless showing up over and over and over again. And I think because we're in this culture of like instant gratification and convenience, people feel like if I'm not perfect at this or I don't have a community in 1 week, I'm going to give up.
Hmm.
And it's way easier to sit and scroll on your phone then go out and show up at this thing and put yourself out there kind of over and over again. And I want to connect this back to money because when you are lonely, scrolling your phone at home, it's way easier for you to be sold to. So I think a lot of companies in this larger kind of system that we're in, like they want you to kind of be digitally isolated and alone. And so that's why I'm like, one of the best things that you can do for yourself in terms of your money is like go outside and talk to another human being.
I'm really clinging to your quest slash mission to inspire more people to become more a part of a community in person. So can I ask, is there anything that because I'm kind of envious too, that you are in the city. And I know, again, I'm just, the grass is always greener. Well, not in the city, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely not.
And I'm wondering if when you're there, are there things that you have found are really accessible for you re-community? Like, are there things that you're, or even differently phrased, are there ways that you are going out and proactively creating the type of community for which you're advocating here?
Definitely. And I will just say too, okay, so I've lived in New York City for almost 9 years. And I want to emphasize it's not something that happens overnight. And it's not always exciting and fun or even successful. I mean, there's, for every like event I have or social event I have where I'm like, this was amazing. I feel so supported. And, I'll have another one where I'm like, that was kind of awkward. And it was, okay. So, but how I get involved in my community is, like I said, I've lived in my current neighborhood in Brooklyn for almost 5 years. And whenever I've moved to a new neighborhood, I very much am like, I'm going outside, I'm going to the local businesses, I'm spending time and getting to know those people that own businesses in the community. Because usually those are kind of like the community leaders. In New York, especially, there's a lot of ways to get involved, whether that be a community board or volunteering. I'm a huge advocate for doing that because you want to get involved. You want to treat your community like a home. And even if you only want to spend a year there, it pays to be kind of invested in the long-term success of that neighborhood. And I'm a huge advocate for that. So again, volunteering is also a great way. I host a lot of dinner parties. And again, it's like an open invite thing. Sometimes a lot of people show up, sometimes a few people show up. And so it's just, again, having that like, okay, every other Sunday I'll host this dinner party and just having that kind of regular touchstone. And again, I live in a walkable city, so I live around a lot of people that I know. I know it's harder in other places, but it's like, okay, I'm going to run these errands. Maybe somebody wants to run errands with me. And so like kind of building that, able to build that kind of social events within like the context of your daily life and stuff you're doing, I think is very helpful. But it's messy and it's kind of long work to kind of build all this stuff. But like I said before, the more you're doing that kind of stuff, the more you're like off your phone, the more you are sharing wisdom with each other, like you're learning from each other. And just I think the overall like happy you are generally.
So if I'm listening to this right now and I'm curious that whether I'm in New York City or Vermont or Nebraska or the UK, and I'm wondering, what are some steps that I could take to transition away from thinking about money and time in this, we keep coming back to this kind of the word just traditional sense of, let's just say that someone is really occupied today with thinking about their net worth, their tax optimization, and their use of every minute for monetization purposes. What are some practical steps that I could take to start to shift that pendulum back the other way? Are there any things that you have found truly successful to just say, look, let's wake up, let's take the other pill, go down the rabbit hole a little bit, and realize there are some other ways to think about this. And here's what we're going to do starting today.
So the first thing, and I know I kind of said this before, but it bears repeating, is like, what do you actually want to do with your life? Like, what is your plan? I genuinely, genuinely do not think that people sit down and have these kind of conversations or thought exercises with themselves or spend enough meaningful time on it. And so it's like, what do you want to get out of life? What do you actually care about? What do you value? Once you understand that, it's a lot easier to kind of make these decisions. The second thing is really just bringing more awareness to your current relationship and habits with money. And so in my newsletter, I talk about these kind of three forces that control our money decisions. The first is like those internal forces. And so that's like your beliefs about money, how money makes you feel, your emotions, your lived experiences with money, all that stuff. The second thing is like social forces. So like your social media algorithm, the people around you, just thinking through like how they are influencing you. And then the third thing is like these structural forces. So like the policies that make it easier or harder for you to build wealth or access wealth, and the products you're using. I think we can all agree there's plenty of products out there that can be quite manipulative and get you to spend money or whatever. And then once you have that awareness and once you understand yourself, you can then start to make more deliberate decisions about money. And the caveat I give to all of this is like, you need to have self-compassion, especially if you are somebody that like me, that is like very locked into the like, I want to optimize things as much as humanly possible. I want to, make sure every minute of my life is hyper productive. You have to understand you're not a robot. Maybe you can achieve it for a day, but you're not going to achieve it in any sort of sustainable long-term way. Okay, have some self-compassion. You're going to mess up. I always say, people are like, oh, you're probably so good with your money. I'm like, listen, I'm just more aware that I'm making all these mistakes. But again, it's just like one of those things where it's like, okay, I did this thing. I would say most of our money decisions, unless you like accidentally bought a house, most of these financial decisions you're making are pretty small and not super consequential over the long term. Okay, let's just move on. Let's just keep moving forward. And it's like building that resilience so you're not getting bogged down by like shame and a little bit of a tangent, but something that happens to me constantly. And I think I brought this up at the beginning of the conversation is I'll tell people, oh, I'm a CFP. I talk to people about money and they always say, oh, I'm so bad with money.
Yes.
And I'm like, stop saying that. Like, stop saying that, because one, it's an identifying statement. So if you believe that you're bad with money, it's going to be really hard to become good with money because you've internalized that belief. And two, it's like one of those things where it's like, you just got to keep moving on. You're not going to be able to kind of build that resilience and really build a better relationship if you're stuck in this place of just believing you're bad, so to speak.
That's really interesting. I can connect that to a situation that I used to bring up with English students. So in my 20s, I taught English. And one of the things I'd always hear from 14 and 15-year-olds was, well, I'm a terrible writer. And the only question I started asking in response was, how frequently do you write? The answer was maybe 1 hour a week, and usually forced via some structural homework assignment. And I said, okay, well, you're a hockey player. How often do you play hockey? And they say, well, about 2 hours a day. Say, okay, so if we want to be good at something, and now kind of bringing this back to money, the forums in which people can go and talk about money or experience money or reflect on money are so few and far between, or ultimately really difficult to access because they need a certain net worth to work with this person or need to join this investing community, that it's no surprise that someone would not feel confident with money if they don't have the space to go and talk about it and reflect on it and get better at it, right, and understand it. But ultimately, I think, so I want to kind of tie that back to your first point where you say, look, before anything else, we need to figure out what we value in life. And I will push back on this and say, I think that's the hardest question. And I really do believe that anybody even listening to this conversation, when you went on to step 2, I'll bet there were people who said, wait a minute, I'm not past step 1 yet. And there's a great old scene. I would call this the new version of the Italian Job, but now it's probably 20 years old. So it's the old version of the new Italian Job. But there's a scene where Edward Norton, who's supposed to be the villain in the movie, he finally it gets all this money. And when he's trying to figure out what to do with it, the punchline is that the only thing he could figure out to spend the money on was what all of his friends, or ex-friends at this point, had said they were going to spend money on. So he had bought this great sound system, he had bought this great television, he had bought this great car, but none of it was what he wanted. It was what he had been told he should want if he had millions and millions of dollars. So I'm just wondering if there's any more way to kind of think through, to me, what I think some people spend their entire lives thinking about is, what do I actually spend money on and what do I value? And before I move to that step 2 and step 3, which is phenomenal, and I would love to get there, but can I cut through all this noise and really figure out, what do I value? And are there any techniques that you found that really do help me just a little bit more understand what that looks like for me, so I'm not buying what my friends want to buy?
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And I will actually maybe add the caveat where also it will change over the course of your life. Like 25-year-old Hannah will probably have vastly different values than like 65-year-old Hannah. I'm just going to assume. Maybe she won't. But, so again, it's like this ongoing lifelong thing. So when I say like, what do you value? Maybe we can soften a little bit and like, what is bringing you contentedness and fulfillment right now? And also, when you think about your life, I mean, I'm not saying everybody has to have every single answer because, again, these things will change, but maybe you want to have kids. Maybe that you want to travel, for 6 months or take a sabbatical. You already know that about yourself. That's a great place to start. Because if you feel like sure about something, that's like kind of maybe a place you can start, and then you can back into like, okay, why do I want to take a sabbatical so bad? Or why do I want to have children? Is it because I value stability? And then again, you can kind of then back into things a little bit, but also understand that like all this is very malleable and it will change. And I guess the thought exercise then, and like a better way of defining step 1, is just thinking like, because again, so many of our money decisions are just on autopilot and are just influenced by other people around us and are not driven by ourselves. So just think like, okay, what would make me happy right now? What's like bringing me fulfillment? And then again, then maybe it's that step 2 of like awareness of like, how am I currently spending my money? Is it in alignment with things that make me fulfilled? Or is it just because I had a really bad day at work and then this Instagram ad told me to go buy this thing? And then I think you can start to see, where is there a disconnect between things that bring you happiness and fulfillment and things that don't.
That is helpful. If I wanted to connect with you after this show, if I were listening right now and saying, this sounds a little more refreshing or a little more human than my current advisor or my current coaching or just the way I think about money, where are some of the ways that people can find you or connect with you?
Yeah, definitely. So I do one-on-one financial planning myself, though it's heavily rooted in behavioral stuff. So, you'll get what you would normally get from a CFP, but a lot of the work I do is also very much wrapped up in like, let's like go through this exercise that we're just talking about. And it's nice, I think, at least in my experience of working with other people, to have that sounding board, because just kind of talking about these things out loud can help guide you in the right direction. Because again, a lot of people I don't think have had these sorts of thought exercises or had these sorts of conversations before. That's one thing I do. I also have a newsletter called Your Brain on Money, where I write a lot about these kind of broader forces that shape how we think about money and ourselves. And I do content around that too. You can find me on almost every social channel there is.
Awesome. Well, that's how I first found you, obviously, was the social channels. And I will tell everyone listening that if you don't know Hanna Horvath, you should look her up. The writing is fantastic. The thinking is fantastic. Hanna, thanks for spending the time today. I know, again, you've got plenty to write about and think about, and I hope this was a quasi decent use of your time, but I really appreciate you taking the time to chat about all this today. And I am sure that it will prove very useful for people listening. Thanks for tuning in to your Money Guide on the Side. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to visit my website at tylergardner.com for even more helpful resources and insights. And if you are interested in receiving some quick and actionable guidance each week, don't forget to sign up for my weekly newsletter, where each Sunday I share 3 actionable financial ideas to help you take control of your money and investments. You can find the sign-up link on my website, tylergardner.com, or on any of my socials at socialcapofficial. Until next time, I'm Tyler Gardner, your money guide on the side, and I truly hope this episode got you one step closer to where you need to be.